March of 1242 AD, an army that had instilled dread across the globe was retreating eastward across Hungary's muddy plains. These were the Mongols, formidable horsemen who had dismantled powerful empires spanning from China to Persia. Just months prior, they had handed Hungary a devastating defeat in one of Europe's most ruinous battles. Western Europe's heartland, Vienna, lay practically within their grasp. Yet, abruptly, they turned back. For 800 years, the question of what prompted this seemingly invincible army, poised to conquer all of Europe, to suddenly abandon its plans, appeared to have a straightforward answer. However, recent analyses of climatic data, archaeological discoveries, and military strategies have unveiled a much more complex and surprising reality. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is currently for you. I'm genuinely curious to understand which corners of the world are engaging with this narrative. Because today's account delves not only into the saga of a mighty empire, but also into how the convergence of forces beyond anyone's complete control can reshape the destinies of an entire continent and the trajectory of history. To grasp the immense significance of the Mongol withdrawal, we must journey back to 1206. That year, an individual named Temujin achieved what seemed impossible. He unified all the Mongol tribes under a single banner. He adopted the title of Genghis Khan, universal ruler, and from that point, commenced the construction of the most sprawling continental empire in human history. The Mongols' power wasn't solely rooted in their fierceness. They possessed an incredibly sophisticated military system. They could cover up to 100 kilometers daily, 3 times faster than European armies. On the battlefield, they utilized signal flags and whistling arrows for communication. But most crucially, they were unparalleled masters of psychological warfare. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his third son, Ögedei, became his successor. Ögedei lacked his father's strategic brilliance, but he excelled at employing talented individuals. Under his command was Subutai, the greatest military genius in Mongolian history. It was Subutai who masterminded the European military campaign. In 1235, he presented Ögedei with an audacious plan to launch a 5-pronged attack on Europe simultaneously. The objective wasn't merely to pillage, but to conquer territories stretching to the Great Sea, meaning the Atlantic Ocean. In 1236, approximately 150,000 Mongol horsemen crossed the Volga River. They swept through Eastern Europe like a tempest. Volga Bulgaria fell. Russian principalities were overrun one after another. Kiev, the jewel of Kievan Rus, was completely razed in 1240. But Subutai's primary target was Hungary. Why? Because Hungary served as the gateway to the heart of Europe. And there was another reason: the Cumans. The Cumans were a nomadic tribe residing in the Russian steppes. During the Mongol invasion, about 40,000 Cumans sought refuge in Hungary. King Bela I of Hungary accepted them, even styling himself as the King of Cumania. For the Mongols, this became a pretext for war. In late 1240, Batu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, issued an ultimatum to Bela: surrender unconditionally or face utter annihilation. Bela did not respond. A looming storm gathered over Europe. In March 1241, 3 Mongol armies entered Hungary from 3 different directions. This was classic Subutai tactics: divide and conquer, then regroup for a decisive strike. Batu Khan and Subutai led the main forces, advancing through the heavily fortified Vareka Pass. They annihilated the army of Count Denis Thomas in mere hours. A European observer likened their advance to lightning. Bela attempted to prepare. He ordered the construction of dense natural barriers along the eastern frontier. But the Mongols possessed specialized engineering units. They cleared these obstacles in just 3 days. Meanwhile, another Mongol army moved through Poland as a diversionary maneuver. On April 9, 1241, at Legnica, they clashed with a coalition of Poles, Moravians, and Templar Knights under the command of Duke Henry II. The battle showcased terrifying examples of Mongol tactics. They repeatedly employed feigned attacks and simulated retreats, drawing the heavy European cavalry out of formation. They used thick black smoke to create confusion, and once the enemy was disorganized, they encircled and annihilated them. Henry II was killed. The Mongols severed his head, impaled it on a spear, and paraded it through the city. Within weeks, they collected the ears of the vanquished, 9 full bags worth. Yet, this was merely a diversionary operation. The real battle unfolded in Hungary. On April 10th, the Hungarian army, numbering between 60,000 and 100,000 men, reached the banks of the Saho River near the village of Mohi. They outnumbered the Mongols 2-1. Bela was self-assured, overly so. That night, the Mongols attempted to cross the bridge, but were repelled by Hungarian crossbowmen. The Hungarians believed they had won. They retreated to their camp for festivities, leaving only a small contingent to guard the bridge, a fatal miscalculation. In the early hours of April 11th, the Mongols launched another assault. This time, they deployed traction trebuchets that hurled incendiary projectiles, leveraging Chinese gunpowder technology. However, this was merely a frontal feint designed to divert attention. Unknown to the Hungarians, Subutai had led 30,000 cavalry in a flanking maneuver to the south under the cover of night. They located a ford to cross the river and constructed a makeshift pontoon bridge. As dawn broke, Subutai emerged at the rear of the Hungarian positions. Bela I suddenly grasped that they were encircled. He ordered the entire army to fall back to the camp. Yet, the camp itself was poorly designed by Bela. It was too congested, with tents pitched close together, and wagons, intended as barriers, actually hampered movement. Batu, observing from a hill, noted, "They are packed in like cattle in narrow stalls, with no room to maneuver." The Mongols began pelting the camp with firebombs. Smoke and flames choked the air. The Hungarians panicked, and then Subutai executed his renowned tactic. He deliberately created an opening in the encirclement. Bela IV, spotting a chance to escape, bolted. When the Mongols made no attempt to stop him, the entire Hungarian army, abandoning their weapons, surged through this gap. This was precisely what Subutai had intended. As soon as the Hungarians exited the camp in disarray, breaking formation, Subutai gave the signal. The Mongol cavalry attacked from all sides. The historian, Thomas of Split, bearing witness to the aftermath, recorded, "When the Mongols saw that their enemies were exhausted from running and couldn't raise their arms to fight or their legs to flee, they began to rain spears on them from all sides and cut them down with swords, sparing no one, slaying them like animals. To the right and left, they fell like leaves. The entire path in winter was covered with their wretched bodies. Blood flowed like a river. 60,000 Hungarian soldiers perished. Nearly all of the kingdom's nobility and military leadership were annihilated. King Bela IV narrowly escaped death thanks to his valiant guard and Batu's instruction to capture him alive. He fled to Austria, but Duke Frederick, who should have been an ally, imprisoned him and extorted a hefty ransom. In the ensuing months, the Mongols systematically devastated Hungary. They seized the royal seal from the body of Vice-Chancellor Bela and compelled captive Hungarian scribes to forge a proclamation in the king's name, directing the populace to remain in their homes without fear, as the king would soon strike back. This cunning stratagem allowed the Mongols to roam the countryside unopposed and slaughter thousands. An estimated 25 to 50% of Hungary's population, possibly up to 500,000 people, died that year. It was one of the most horrific humanitarian disasters of the Middle Ages. During the winter of 1241 to 1242, terror gripped Europe. News of the catastrophe at Mohi spread across the continent. People whispered dreadful things about the Mongols. They were barbarians. They had no religion. They consumed human flesh. In reality, the Mongols were not cannibals and were tolerant of their captives' religions. But in the European imagination of the 13th century, they were associated with Gog and Magog, the forces of evil from the Bible, destined to emerge at the end of time. Even their name reflected this fear. The term Tartars, or Tatars, originally used for the nomadic peoples of Central Eurasia, was expanded to include the Mongols. Why? Because in ancient times, the underworld was also known as Tartarus. In 1241, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II wrote that he hoped the Mongols would be cast back into their Tartarus. But fear could not substitute for preparation. European kingdoms failed to cooperate. Pope Innocent IV called for a crusade against the Mongols, but support was insufficient. Bela dispatched letters pleading for assistance to the Pope, the Holy Roman Emperor, and the King of France. No one responded seriously. They seemed oblivious to the threat. Meanwhile, the Mongols prepared for their next move. They crossed the Danube, their final barrier, in the winter of 1242. Mongol scouts penetrated deep into Bohemia and reached the outskirts of Vienna. Batu Khan's forces poured into Austria, Dalmatia, and Moravia. Where there was resistance, they mercilessly exterminated the population. Where there was no resistance, they conscripted men into Mongol military service. Vienna, a wealthy city and cultural hub of Europe, lay directly before them, and beyond Vienna lay all of Western Europe, Germany, France, Italy, Spain. Nothing stood in their way, save for one event. On December 11, 1241, in Karakorum, the capital of the Mongol Empire, 8,000 kilometers east of Hungary, the Great Khan Ögedei went hunting. That evening, he drank with friends. Ögedei was known for his heavy drinking. His brother Chagatai had even appointed an official to monitor his drinking habits, but Ögedei always found ways to indulge. He reportedly pledged to reduce his daily cup intake, but subsequently ordered cups twice their usual size. The next morning, at dawn, Ögedei passed away at only 56 years old. A stroke or organ failure due to excessive alcohol consumption was the probable cause, though rumors of poisoning also circulated. Under the Mongolian succession system, when a great Khan died, all princes were required to return to Karakorum to participate in a Kurultai, a council convened to elect a successor. This was an unbreakable law. In early 1242, news of Ögedei's death began to spread. When it reached the Mongol commanders in Hungary, they reacted unexpectedly. Despite SUB's advice, they decided to retreat. This is the traditional explanation we've heard for 800 years, and it seems logical, but a deeper look reveals a more complex narrative. Firstly, the timeline doesn't align. Ögedei died in December 1241, yet the Mongols only began their retreat in March 1242. A courier would have needed at least 3 to 4 months to travel from Karakorum to Hungary, even under the fastest conditions. The historian Rashid al-Din, citing Mongol sources, wrote that Batu Khan learned of Ögedei's death when he had already reached Kiev, having completed nearly a quarter of his journey home. Secondly, and more significantly, Batu Khan never returned to Mongolia. He remained in southern Rus, consolidating his power as the Golden Horde's ruler. He did not attend the Kurultai because he harbored a deep animosity towards Guyuk, Ögedei's son. Batu Khan knew that a journey to Karakorum could expose him to significant political danger. So, if Ögedei's death wasn't the sole reason, what else transpired? In 2016, a team of scientists published groundbreaking research in the journal Scientific Reports. They analyzed dendrochronological data, tree rings that annually record climatic conditions, from the Austrian Alps and Romanian Carpathians. Their findings transformed our understanding of the Mongol withdrawal. From 1238 to 1241, Europe experienced unusually warm and dry summers. This was ideal for the Mongol army, whose cavalry required extensive pastures for their horses. Dry, firm ground facilitated rapid movement. A European observer even noted the heat that afflicted Hungarian soldiers at the Battle of Muhi on April 11th. However, in early 1242, the climate shifted abruptly and dramatically. Summers became cold and wet. Torrential rains transformed the Hungarian plains into a vast marshland. This might seem like a minor weather change, but for a nomadic army entirely reliant on cavalry, it was catastrophic. Firstly, the boggy terrain reduced available pasture. Each Mongol cavalryman needed multiple horses, typically 5 to 7. An army of 40,000 meant between 200,000 and 280,000 horses, all needing to graze daily. With meadows submerged, there was no forage for the horses. Secondly, the mud hampered mobility. The Mongols' greatest strength, their light cavalry designed for speed and maneuverability, became cumbersome in deep mud. Tactics of swift encirclement and lightning raids became impracticable. Thirdly, and perhaps most crucially, was the problem of provisions. The Mongols had been devastating Hungary for a year, killing 25 to 50% of the population and destroying most settlements. Who remained to farm? Who remained to supply a massive army with food? Researchers concluded that the subtle climatic changes of 1241 to 1242 were significant enough to alter the conditions under which the Mongols initially invaded Hungary. These changes would have prevented them from effectively functioning as an occupying army, compelling their retreat. Yet even this isn't the complete picture. For centuries, the story of the Mongol invasion has been told from the perspective of the conquerors. Hungary was vanquished, Europe was helpless, and only Ögedei's death saved Europe. However, recent research, particularly by Hungarian historians, has unveiled a different narrative, one of resistance and attrition. While the Mongols decisively won the Battle of Mohi, the subsequent history is far more intricate. Hungary possessed one severe weakness in 1241, a lack of stone castles. King Bela I and his predecessors had forbidden the nobility from constructing private fortifications, fearing it would lead to decentralized power and a strong aristocracy. As a result, most Hungarian fortifications were made of wood, clay, and earth, unable to withstand Mongol siege engines. But some stone castles did exist, and in these locations, the Mongols encountered significant challenges. The Klis fortress in Croatia, where King Bela I sought refuge, successfully resisted. The Mongols besieged it, but failed to capture it. Many other fortresses across Hungary also held out. While Mongol cavalry dominated open battlefields, they struggled with prolonged siege warfare. Furthermore, following the collapse of Hungary's official military, a partisan resistance emerged. Royal retinue survivors who hadn't reached Mohi, alongside armed peasant militias, engaged in guerrilla warfare against Mongol forces. They targeted supply trains, ambushed small patrols, and occasionally even won direct clashes. Hungarian historians suggest that the organized resistance of the Hungarian people, though scarcely detailed in Western chronicles, played a much more significant role than previously assumed. It hampered the Mongol war machine, making each Mongol advance more costly. And then there was Vienna. This was a large, wealthy, and well-fortified city. Duke Frederick II of Austria, despite his animosity towards Bela I, was a skilled military leader. He mustered his heavy cavalry units and devised methods to counter Mongol tactics. His strategy revolved around active defense. Instead of awaiting a siege, he intercepted smaller Mongol detachments. In the autumn of 1241, he defeated Batu Khan's forces in battles along Vienna's perimeter, from the Vienna woods to the Morava River. While these victories weren't decisive, they sufficed to signal to Batu Khan that further penetration would be difficult. Germany and the rest of Western Europe were better defended than Hungary. Their populations were considerably larger, and now they had time to prepare. Recent archaeological findings also indicate that the Mongols incurred far heavier losses in the Hungarian campaign than ancient sources reported. It was not an easy conquest. Every fortified stronghold, every guerrilla ambush, every battle near Vienna chipped away at Mongol strength. Batu Khan faced a complex decision. He could either press on into Western Europe with a depleted army and unfavorable weather, confronting a prepared enemy, or retreat, consolidate his gains, and plan for a more formidable future campaign. Then came news of Ögedei's death. So, what truly prompted the Mongols' withdrawal from Europe? The answer isn't a single cause. It's a confluence of many factors, each playing a part. Ögedei's death triggered a political crisis within the Mongol Empire, which lacked a clear system of succession. Each time a Great Khan died, the threat of civil war loomed. Batu Khan, though not returning to Mongolia, understood the need to protect his interests. He couldn't remain too far from the center of power for an extended period. Climate change transformed Hungary from an ideal base into a logistical quagmire. The Mongol army, adapted to dry steppes, struggled in the swampy terrain. Their horses starved, supplies dwindled, and a long-term occupation became untenable. The military resistance in Hungary, near Vienna, and the prospect of a better organized Western Europe escalated the cost of every advance. The Mongols weren't invincible. They could achieve victory, but at what cost, and with their already weakened army? Could they hold what they conquered? And perhaps there's one final factor rarely mentioned. The initial objective might have been achieved. Some historians propose that the primary goal of the invasion wasn't to conquer all of Europe, but to punish the Cumans and those who sheltered them, particularly Hungary. If so, after the complete devastation of Hungary, the mission was accomplished. Subutai, the great strategist, undoubtedly advised continued advance. He understood this was a once-in-a-millennium opportunity. But Batu Khan and the other princes declined, not out of fear, but because they calculated. They recognized the risks, weighed the costs, and decided to withdraw. This is an important historical lesson. Major decisions rarely stem from a single reason. They are the cumulative product of numerous intersecting forces: political, environmental, military, and even individual psychology. In the spring of 1242, Mongol forces retreated eastward. They left behind a devastated Hungary. King Bela I returned to his kingdom from his refuge in Croatia. What he witnessed must have been heartbreaking. Ruined cities, burned villages, abandoned fields, and a population reduced by a quarter, if not half. But Bela did not surrender. He learned a costly lesson. Over the next 30 years, he transformed Hungary into a fortress. He initiated one of the largest castle-building programs of the Middle Ages. By the end of his reign, Hungary boasted nearly 100 new stone castles, compared to just 10 in 1241. He also reformed the army, emphasizing heavy cavalry and crossbowmen, weapons that proved effective against the Mongols. He welcomed new settlers, granting them conditional nobility in exchange for fully equipped military service. He established a connection with Venice to enlist at least 1,000 skilled crossbowmen. These endeavors bore fruit. In 1285, 44 years after their initial incursion, the Mongols returned, this time led by Nogai and Tula Bugi. They retraced the same paths as Batu with Espum, but on this occasion, they encountered a transformed Hungary. Stone fortresses now impeded their progress. The local populace hoarded provisions within strongholds and employed scorched earth tactics to deprive the invaders of sustenance. King Laszlo I steered clear of decisive engagements, instead utilizing guerrilla warfare and ambushes. Talibuga, commanding the main forces in northern Hungary, found his army stalled by heavy snows in the Carpathians. His troops faced dire circumstances due to logistical challenges, particularly a severe shortage of food, which claimed thousands of soldiers' lives. Some accounts even mentioned a plague outbreak. Ultimately, the Mongols retreated once more, having achieved nothing this time. Hungary endured. For Europe as a whole, the Mongol withdrawal in 1242 held immense significance. It averted a scenario where the entire continent might have succumbed to Mongol pressure, as had Russia, China, and Persia. Later European chroniclers regarded this event as a divine intervention. Giovanni del Carpine, a monk who visited the Mongol court in 1246, wrote that God orchestrated the Great Khan's death to safeguard Latin Christendom. However, as we observe, the truth is far more intricate and, in some ways, more compelling. It was not a miracle, but rather a confluence of geopolitical factors, climatic shifts, human tenacity, and carefully considered strategic decisions. So, what does this narrative reveal? Firstly, it reminds us that no power is unconquerable. The Mongol Empire, the largest in history by territory, had its limitations. These boundaries were not merely military, but also logistical, environmental, and political. Secondly, it highlights the importance of preparation and learning from experience. Bela I suffered a catastrophic defeat in 1241 because Hungary was unprepared. But he grasped the lesson, and 40 years later, Hungary was ready. The distinction between the two invasions lay not in luck, but in readiness. Thirdly, it illustrates the power of resilience. Hungary lost between 25% and 50% of its population. Cities were razed, the economy collapsed, Yet they recovered. Not swiftly, not easily, but they accomplished it. This speaks volumes about the human spirit. Fourthly, it reminds us of the environment's role in history. We often perceive history as solely about people, kings, generals, and decisions. But climate, geography, and the environment also play a crucial part. The damp summer of 1242 influenced European history as much as any battle. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, history rarely offers simple answers. For 800 years, we had a neat story. The Mongols retreated because Ögedei died. Simple, memorable, easy to teach. But when we delve deeper, when we examine climatic data, archaeological studies, and forgotten sources, we discover a much more complex and rich history. And this is precisely what makes history captivating. Not because it provides straightforward answers, but because it reveals the complexity of reality and how numerous diverse forces, from climate to politics, from individuals to state structures, collaborate to shape the destinies of nations and continents. On a spring day in 1242, a historical opportunity vanished on the muddy roads of Hungary. Ögedei, the greatest strategist in Mongol history, boasting over 60 victories, cast his final gaze westward. He knew they would never return, and he was correct. The Mongols would never again approach Europe so closely. Had they pressed on, had the weather been different, had Ögedei lived longer, had Bela I been better prepared, history could have unfolded in a dramatically different manner. But it did not, and in the space between what transpired and what might have, we find one of the most engrossing tales in human history. If this video offered you a fresh perspective on a pivotal moment in history, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell to ensure you don't miss future in-depth historical narratives. Leave a comment and let me know which factor you believe played the most significant role in saving Europe. Ögedei's death, the weather, military resistance, or a combination of all three. And if you appreciate historical stories told in this manner, respecting complexity, grounded in research, yet engaging and accessible, please share this video with your history-loving friends. Because history isn't just about the past. It's how we comprehend the world in all its intricacy, uncertainty, and the difficult choices people face in every era. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.